All right. Welcome to CHADEV. Thank you guys for coming. This week, we did not have a sponsor. We're a little bit sad, but we do have amazing organizers, and John Cotton came through and bought everyone pizza today, so he's not even here, but let's give him a round of applause. So if you know anyone who would be interested in sponsoring CHADEV so we can keep this thing going, please reach out to one of the organizers. We may be coming up with some more creative, maybe like a fundraiser thing that we can all come out to and kind of throw a little support our way so we can keep going through the year. So that will be coming later. We do have Jeff here, and he's got a community announcement, so I'll turn it over to him.
Hey y'all, I'm Jeff. I work for the Enterprise Center. Tonight, in this exact spot, using this exact same equipment, Mayor Burke and Mayor Bill Peduto of Pittsburgh are going to be having a virtual conversation about digital equity, the digital divide, and the work our cities are doing. Y'all are invited to that. We'll have conga. A couple community organizations will present as well. But just sort of the idea of digital equity in Chattanooga. If you're interested, please come out tonight.
And before we get started with our speaker, do you guys have any community announcements that you wanted to share? I know we just had Hack Night last night, so not next week, but the week after that. There'll be a Hack Night, 6 p.m. And we've been doing interview practice questions where we go through some semi-typical practice questions and give you some practice. I keep using that word, but you get some practice in talking through your code around people and getting more comfortable with interviewing. So that happens every other Wednesday, 6 p.m. over there. Does anybody have Python meetup? June 17th? Great. Python meetup. That is on Meetup, so you can go and see more details there. Great. We will not be having CHADEV next week, so be aware of that. We will make an announcement when the next one is. We're working out some financial things, and we are considering maybe doing like a, hey, go enjoy your summer kind of thing. So stay tuned for that. So without much further ado, today we have Dean Holland, and he's talking on compliance and regulation in software. So let's give him a hand.
All right, compliance, whoa. Testing, 1, 2. Check. I know you can hear me. Okay, how was that? Too much ring still, or are we okay? Or am I the only one hearing the ring? That happens when you get older, I promise. Speaking of older, I'm glad to see that there's a few people out of their 20s here today besides myself and Mike here that has joined me from Goodfeather. So real quick, a little bit about myself, then Goodfeather and Mike and what we're up to. And I guess if I were on my game too, I would actually start this presentation. All right. Okay, so once again, my name is Dean Holland. Does anybody here know of me? I mean, that's a narcissistic question, I guess, to ask. But okay, so I actually have worked in the Chattanooga area for a lot of my life. I've probably 24, 25 years. Spent most of my career at what is now Unum, starting out as a mainframe application programmer. So yeah, I know what JCL and COBOL and stuff like that is. And trivia question, does anybody know what VxRex is? I programmed on that, okay? Okay, but never mind. So I was going to give a door prize to somebody, but the leftover pizza. But okay, but I moved from there over to Blue Cross. I spent 14 years at Blue Cross as a systems engineer, primarily supporting Linux and AIX systems and then the storage environment, the storage area networks and stuff like that. and then moved from there a couple of times, but the longest of that was spent at a local company called Infosystems here in Chattanooga. Has anybody heard of Infosystems? Okay, all right. So once again, did a lot of infrastructure type work on behalf of them for companies, well, like back into Blue Cross and Deloitte over in Nashville and stuff. Now, as part of that, then, I've always had a foot in security and compliance. I mean, if you're standing up infrastructure, you need to have a foot in security somehow. And in the role that I played, especially at Blue Cross, then I was also responsible for the security of the systems that I was managing, which meant I had to play in the compliance game and interact with auditors. And enough about that. That's any auditors in here? Good. Yeah, not my favorite people. Anyway, so I ultimately ended up here at Good Feather Solutions. Good Feather is a company that had its genesis here in the Chattanooga area, and I know that you've not heard of it yet until today, but it's because basically we're just getting launched to a degree. Been in existence a couple of years, but ultimately 3 lines of business that we're attempting to tackle, one being what we're calling Good Feather Consulting, which is where Mike Davis, that's joined me from, is it Tuscaloosa, basically, somewhere in Alabama. He's our global vice president of consulting. Now, what that means is it's traditional software sales and the services or the consulting that goes around those services, or excuse me, around the software sales. But then also we've got a silo we call technologies, which is an app dev silo. And then finally, public, which just is what it sounds like. We're selling services into primarily the federal government, such as CDC down in Atlanta. We have partnered with a company called ShieldIO. This company has created a tool, which is where we're going today. At the end of this discussion, you'll get to see that for a little bit. And I apologize for the fact that there's going to be just a small product pitch here. That's not what it's all about. Mostly, we want to get everybody thinking about the true impact of compliance and some of the new regulations that are coming down the pipe. And some of them really are game changers, if you've been paying attention. Okay, so let's see here. Without further ado, well, let me ask too. Okay, is everybody here specifically in the app dev space? Pretty much. Okay. All right. Good. So, how many of you then are also deeply involved in the security of the data, whether it's the upfront design process or whatever, and are sitting on perhaps troves of personal data? Okay, how many of you are sweating bullets about whether that's going to get out in the wild, whether you're going to be called up in front of, Congress or some judge or something at some point in time to answer for the fact that that data is now out in the wild, all right? Okay, I would be sweating bullets if I were sitting on that data, just to be honest. And so this company, ShieldIO, is one of the very few companies that are truly attempting to address that in as much of a foolproof manner as possible. Now, there is nothing completely foolproof, we know that. As soon as you think you've developed, the perfect safe, somebody finds a crack to get into the safe, right? And so, but this, I think you'll find that we have an intriguing new option, and part of the reason I'm here is to get feedback on that, all right? Now, touch just a bit on the agenda. The heck with the agenda, I hardly ever stick to it. Very quick overview on regulations. So we've all heard of GDPR. Anybody here impacted by that? Working on systems that are perhaps global in nature, and that, okay, so we got 1, okay, 2, 3, okay, so 4. Okay, so it's getting bigger and bigger, right? If you work with any systems that have a global reach, okay, you have to worry about GDPR. And it's pretty ominous, should you decide to let the Russians have your data. Of course, in the US, you've got the different standards that have been introduced. You've got, like, the California, New York have introduced new regulation that is actually working to protect the consumer, the person whose data is being stored in these systems, right? And kudos to them. Now, I guess it's a little bit early to tell yet whether or not the burden that's being put on developers and companies that are housing the data, whether it's too great, I don't know that yet. We'll take some feedback from that too, if you know. But something that I find interesting that we have on our list, China and Russia, of all people, also have their own standards, their own rules and regulations around the protection of personal data. But what I want to know is if Russia has the same standards for like the data that they steal from the DNC, for example. Is that protected data in Russia? I don't know. But regardless, one of the things that actually multiple of the trends that we see developing from the various and sundry new regulatory efforts is, for example, the right to be forgotten. Now that's pretty cool. I mean, I would love to be able to go out to wherever, and say, forget about me. I'm tired of being, profiled and et cetera. I'm tired of, Facebook Messenger listening to me on my wife's iPhone, and then popping up an ad, related to the conversation we were having last night. I would like them to forget me, just to be honest. Now, if there's some of you here that are actually benefiting from that kind of, the data collection, the algorithms, I apologize in advance. But I'm an old dog, and, I grew up in the days before cell phones, honestly. I shouldn't have said that, all right? Okay, and yes, I programmed on the mainframe. But besides that, and this should be inherent, the right for your data to be secure. I mean, that should be obvious, right? But somehow we miss that. How many places is storing data in an insecure manner? And most of the time it's unencrypted. A lot of times the access controls are improper. Heck, how many places have been busted for having data in a S3 bucket on Amazon? There was a particular 3-letter acronym government agency actually that was in that list. I found that interesting. Okay, but then also the right to seek recompense. Okay, if a breach happens, you can actually get paid for losing your data now. Apparently, under some of these new regulations, I think it's New York, $750 a pop. So I'm thinking, okay, there's a new, income model. Go sign up, everywhere that could possibly collect data on you in the New York space, and just sit back and wait to, file your claim for $750, right? Anyway, now, once again, it goes without saying that as an organization, we have an obligation to make sure that the data that we collect is secured, that we've done all that we can. We're talking about compliance here, but I realize, and that's what drives a lot of our security efforts. In fact, it drives most of them anymore. I mean, how many people are worried about security until they're hacked, or until there is a threat of fines or something, some severe consequence? One of the reasons why we have so many hacks, we've lost so much data, is because people haven't gotten serious enough about it, and hence we have compliance, which is now driving more security efforts. And so one of the underlying themes here that we're going to be discussing, or that we're talking about today, is basically the encryption of non-public information. This little graphic is trying to describe the state of things in New York now with their new regulations. But ultimately what it comes down to is protecting the data and finding a way to encrypt it at rest, in use, and in transit. For those familiar or having to deal with GDPR, there are severe consequences, severe financial consequences for those who fail to protect the data that they house. And this level 2, I can't explain exactly what that is yet, but 20 million pounds, what's that, $7 million for violation? So, these government entities are getting really serious about enforcing the protection of personal data. Tennessee, I don't know exactly what it is. Anybody really familiar with the laws in Tennessee? Okay, so if I can find it here. Yeah, heck with it. So basically, in Tennessee, you are responsible or you're subjected to fines if you lose data that is not encrypted, or if you lose encrypted data along with the key or the key store that goes with that encryption, okay? So it's the same thing, and it doesn't matter that you encrypt it. If they steal the key store as well, regardless of whether they can hack the key store, you're now going to be fined, and it's severe. And it's like, $10,000 minimum per incident or something like that, and another $5,000 per day per person whose identity has been assumed. And there's some crazy angles on the fines, okay, but it adds up to a lot of money in a hurry. And I say all that to say that this is serious. It's a serious business, and we all need to get serious about it. Okay. It does for the perp. I don't know if it does for, okay, since I'm from Blue Cross, like an executive at Blue Cross, even though I know a couple that might need to be in jail. I don't know the answer. Does anybody know that, whether Tennessee law would provide for jail time as part of a sentence for a company or an executive or other responsible member at a company? Okay, that's something we probably need to. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so let me move on past this. We're running out of time. So once again, everybody's familiar with the multiple layers of security, whether you're directly involved in implementing those layers or not. Whether it's the physical, the doors, locks on doors, and then moving down to the network firewalls and intrusion detection, prevention, etc. Okay, but ultimately, all of those layers serve to protect the crown jewels. It is your data. That is what's on the inside. That is what you're attempting to keep either the bad guys out of or keep the wrong guys internally from looking at, etc. All right, and of course, all it takes is just one executive beating up on executives today. One executive clicking the wrong thing in a phishing email, okay, and we have trouble, right? And so our focus, okay, good feather in as much as the data protection side of our practice, in conjunction with ShieldIO, our focus is on the data. Now, okay, so we typically break down, the perps, okay, or the people that have accessed your data in terms of malicious or, outsider or malicious and accidental insider. Now, based on the stats that I've seen lately, the majority of data breaches happen on the inside as a result of either, once again, accidental access, somebody that's been given a little too much privilege, okay, or an actual malicious insider, whether it's a consultant or whoever, okay, somebody that is looking to benefit or profit from that data. All of the numbers here lately say that is a much greater percentage of data breaches than external breaches. Yes, external does happen, but it is in the minority at this point. How to keep the internal breaches from happening. So several data approaches. We've talked about encryption, which includes a key store manager. TDE, transparent data encryption. We familiar with that? Basically under well, not MySQL, but Oracle or SQL Server, DB2, you have the option to encrypt the files on disk that the data is stored in, all right? Okay. The problem with that is that once you crank up the database engine, and it accesses the data as it's up in memory, as it's being processed, it is unencrypted. And so if you actually have access into the database, you're circumventing TDE. Other options, in fact, we're seeing this, especially in larger organizations, healthcare organizations, for example, data masking efforts. Anybody been involved in any effort to obfuscate data through some kind of masking technology? Okay, well, you know what it is. You understand what it is, right? Where, you know, you're attempting to, you know, if I need to test against a database, you know, ultimately, you know, I'm going through some redirect or some mechanism that returns something other than what's originally there. Okay, those solutions are costly, expensive, timely to stand up, hard to maintain. Once again, that's one of the issues we're trying to deal with the solution that we're helping bring to market. So, running out of time, so we'll move on through here. Of course, just about everything that we do is data-centric anymore. Not everybody necessarily is collecting data on the individual or financial transactions or whatever. You know, some of your primary industries around such would be insurance and financial. We have plenty of that around here. Once again, I worked at Blue Cross. You've got other big insurance companies, you know, collecting many, many terabytes of data that they never get rid of. And oh, by the way, I know that some of them test with live data. So hold that thought. Okay, but other types of use or situations, okay, that you deal with when trying to protect data is call centers. You know, you've got somebody that has, you call in to have whether it's a password reset or check on some kind of account or something. You don't necessarily know where that person is, but they have access to your data. You know, they may be living in the U.S., you know, subject to U.S. laws, or they may not be. They may be in Costa Rica, they may be in India, they may be in Romania, who knows, right? Okay, so we've got an issue there when developing apps that you've got to find ways to protect the data, to shield, to mask, to morph the data, to according to these new regulations, once again, to protect the data as it is engaged by those who may be outside of your jurisdictions. So, in this specific case with you guys, for the most part, where you are actually developing code, you're testing it, how many of you get to test against live data? And I won't tell if you raise your hand. All right. But is that common? Is that still common practice? I've not been in the app dev space for a few years. I've been more in infrastructure. But if you don't have live data to test against, what are you doing? You're creating mock data sets that don't necessarily resemble reality. Maybe you spend a tremendous amount of time creating those mock data sets, and then it's kind of a pain to manage that. So also you have the issue where you've got companies that are either offshoring development or you're collaborating with other companies offshore in other jurisdictions, right? And you're developing together, you're working against the same test data sets, et cetera. That happens. So what we are attempting to do here with this product that we're trying to help this ShieldIO company take to market is provide people like you the ability to search and analyze data without decrypting it. Store it in an encrypted manner, okay, and be able to utilize it without decrypting it, without either subjecting the data or yourself, you know, to potential problems with the state of New York. I don't want problems with the state of New York, okay? All right, so, but then also, you know, we talked about the key store. If you lose your data, your encrypted data and the key store, you're still in trouble, right? Okay, so how do we get rid of the key store? We'll look at that. All right, how do we enable not only you who is writing code against these data sets, but then any test users, QA people, you know, to have access to that data, you know, without impacting their ability to do their job or the performance of the application. And then finally, how do we roll it out in a very quick manner that is non-disruptive as possible? And so introducing ShieldIO. Plug for the guy that made it all, really smart guy. He has a funny accent. He's from Britain. Um, Several patents in different areas. Okay, so ShieldIO, why or what and why? Okay, it's a product that encrypts the data within the database using what's called real-time keyless homomorphic encryption. It's a mouthful. Anybody heard of homomorphic encryption? Great, okay, we got one. Okay, couple. Basically, and I can't do a good job explaining it. We'll need to get Simon in here to do that one day, but ultimately it's taking a whole lot of variables from the immediate environment to create the hash that's used to do the encryption or to create the key. And it creates it, it tears it down, it doesn't store it, it knows how to recreate it whenever you get ready to access the data again. It's kind of crazy, I don't understand it all, but it's really cool. And so, then, and this is a different way of thinking about data. Okay, when this data goes in, it's encrypted except for a small number of fields that really don't need to be encrypted, but you still get to use the data. You still get to run queries against it, summarize it, and that kind of thing. Ultimately, easy to implement and very little impact on performance. So, Mike, I've not done a great job setting up the product here yet, but we're going to do a real quick demo, and it's always dangerous to do a live demo, especially, on a Windows Surface Pro, running a bunch of virtualization. Okay, but ultimately, I want to leave you with before we go into this, I want you to be thinking about a couple of things. One is, your jobs are changing a little bit. You have new considerations. With new regulations, you've got to think about things like not only how do I protect this data, but you've got to think about how am I going to provide for the customer or the owner of that data, which I'm the owner of my data, kind of. Okay, it is mine. Okay, how are we going to develop abilities within the apps to give so that I can go in and opt out just as easily as I opted in without knowing it, right? How are we going to code apps to where we can truly forget about somebody, all right? Okay, and then finally, how are you going to set up the app and the infrastructure and the exchange of data in a manner that protects the data should the bad person actually get in and make off with it, all right? And so I like to say that with ShieldIO, if the thief comes in and steals your data, all they're going to get is practice. I hope that's true because that's how I'm selling it. All right, quick demo here. Let's find. Anybody here use putty? Yeah, all right. You get a door prize. All right, and I got a trick question. Anybody here use Linux as their primary workstation operating system? Yes. I apologize for having a Windows machine in front of you. All right. Can you kind of make out the, is that too little? Do I need to increase the font size? All right. or subset of the data.
Data set to work with. All this without bothering the DBA to do it.
Bifocals. All right. So what we have here, for those of you familiar with open source technologies, we've got an instance of MariaDB over on the right side, and we have a database called Jumpstart. We just have 4 tables in it. What I'm going to demonstrate is data before and after the encryption. It's a very simple demo. We have this little thing on the left side. It is it's a tool that's been created basically for demoing the encryption capability and give you a before and after view. So did I make the font big enough? Kind of. Okay, you can see it now, kind of. All right. I still can't see it up there, but that's all right. So let's just look at the account table real quick. All right, so this is the unencrypted data in this particular table. I'm filtering it down to just IDs that end in 00. Over here on the left, we've got this, once again, this little tool we call SecQL, S-E-C-Q-L. And from within that, I am going to all right. Oh, I am so sorry. Yes, let's just scoot over and get out of the way. Now, the problem getting old is, the eyesight thing. I got 3 different pairs of glasses. Okay, now, the implementation of this tool is very simple. We don't have time to go into all the specifics, but basically, it's predicated on a mapping of table and column names. That's what's going to get encrypted. It's really simple to set it up. And so I'm just going to go here and say secure. Spell that right? I did not spell that right. I did. Okay, it's going through. There's 4 tables. Should be about 600 rows in each table. And it's encrypting just the columns in each table that we have mentioned here. All right. Now what I failed to do was give you a summarization of the balance beforehand, but that's okay, we'll come back to that. Now, we're going to show you the after and then before. Oh, quit it. One of the columns, account balance, we're going to summarize it outside of ShieldIO. Okay, keeping in mind the data is encrypted. We get a balance that looks something like this. I'm going to tell you that is not the right balance. Good heavens. Let's move over then and to our little handy-dandy tool. We can run MySQL from within it and force MySQL then to route all queries through the encryption-decryption engine. And I am going to apply a password. That's what I want to do. Okay, so at this point, this 35,000, that is the true balance. We've forced in MySQL session through the encryption engine, we've summarized encrypted data. I can't see the data. If I go through anything else to look at it, the data has been encrypted at this point. You can see, even though it comes back in a morphed version, data open, balance, these are not the original values. So anybody accessing the data sees the encrypted value, not the decrypted value. However, I can still operate on those values whenever I run through the encryption engine. Once again, I just summarized the balances running through the encryption engine, and we got the right value. Now I'm gonna do a quick refresh. And let's see. Good, I guess I got out of it. Why live demos typically have trouble. Okay, so let's go back and just say from I cannot see. Doing. All right. Load it. And then finally, values. Oh, come on, stop it. I hate live demos. Here I am doing one to you guys. Well, that's one of the problems with PuTTY for those of you who use it. If you go over here and then actually drag over something, it ultimately copies that and overrides what you just copied. Okay, so this is the original unencrypted data. And you can see at this point, then whenever I run the balance, okay, I said run Windows. Yeah, I even wrote down these queries so I could copy and paste them. Blowing up on me. All right, there we go. So the sum of the unencrypted data is wherever it went, okay, the same as the sum against the encrypted data as long as we were going through the encryption engine. And we don't have time to extrapolate then what that means on a much larger scale, but the whole point, I know we're out of time, whole point is that we have the ability now to encrypt the data at rest, in use, okay, in flight, and still write code against it. It's just that you as the programmer or the tester, you don't get to see the individual values that go into the data, all right? We understand that. and I kind of got to leave you with that because I know we got a break. But real quick, any comments, feedback? Because this is kind of a prototype at this point. We're trying to get this thing to the place where we can truly take it to market, and but we need validation. We need feedback, input from people like you who might actually have use for something like this.
So I noticed in one of your slides. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I find it hard to believe that there's, I could imagine there's minimal performance impact, but to say no performance impact would seem to be a bit of a stretch. Can you speak to the performance and how it, say, performs against other TDM solutions?
So I'm going to come down with you on your side up to a point, right? Because I had the same question. This guy Simon, I threw up the slide very briefly. He's the chief architect behind this thing. He's got patents in this space where he's able to take. He's got algorithms and patented technologies around the manipulation of memory on chip and stuff. I mean, and he's even talking with Intel. Intel is interested in the architecture of this thing and some of the mechanisms he uses to encrypt and decrypt the data. Now, can I give you a really true technical explanation? At this point, I cannot. Now, what I can say, though, is that they've been working, another one of their partners is Teradata. And Teradata has done some amount of testing, and they claim that, I mean, it's a large number, like 71 gig per second or something, that they can load data through the encryption engine. And so in terms of initial loading, you don't see much of a performance hit, if anything. Now, when we get into really complex queries against very large data sets, I don't think we're to the point in testing where we can say, there is either no degradation or that it is, 0.5% or something like that. But I agree with you in principle that there's got to be some little penalty in there somewhere, right? But I don't know how people think about it as much anymore, but originally, like back on the days of the mainframe, you just accepted that you're going to consume 5 to 10% of your CPU cycles doing nothing more than monitoring the system, right? And capturing audit data, et cetera. So you just accepted an overhead and just operating the thing. So I have to think that a small amount of overhead will be acceptable as long as it's not truly impactful. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Notice it took some time to actually secure it.
Mm-hmm.
Does that start to like level off as you get to larger databases? Will it?
That should be linear. Okay. It's the process of encrypting is per row or per column, right? And so it's due to the nature of the homomorphic encryption. And I hope I'm not getting too far out of my ability to reason through this. But you've got a defined set of parameters that are used to establish the hash or the key that is used to encrypt the data and consequently decrypt the data, right? Okay, and so it becomes a matter of how much concurrency do you have going on? If it's just a single load process of data, I would think the performance is going to be linear. Now, if you have multiple either load processes or queries or transactions happening at the same time from 500 different places, maybe we begin to get into some latency. I don't know the answer to that yet. And did I even come close to answering your question?
Pretty good about it.
Okay. Anything else? Yes, sir.
Encrypted fields. Is it possible? I mean, obviously, we're asking for records back. Is it possible to put conditions on these? I expect that you would need to decrypt a field in order to tell whether or not it matches a condition. Definitely expect that there would be that. But
yeah, and there's also design implications for it, right? So, in kind of tying on to that, think of the scenario where today you call into a call center and you're checking on whatever, account balance, you need a password reset, but they have a validation process, right? where you have to supply the answer to your super secret questions and the last 4 digits of your social and whatnot. Today, that person in that foreign land on that call center, they're seeing all of your personal data, right? Okay, turn that around a little bit, and now they can't see it, but what they can do is poke it. They can say, okay, you just told me, your birthday was January 5th, 1968. They enter that in, and the system comes back yes or no. Right? It's a little different way of looking at how you set up a system like that. They don't get to see all of the values, but they get to poke it to test to see if the supplied value is correct. Right? Is it 100% secure at that point? Well, not technically, but it's a lot closer. Right? They can't gain access to the data and do a big dump and make off with a treasure trove of something they're heading to Ukraine to sell. So, did that answer? And oh, by the way, there's a couple versions. This one for production, one for test and development. It's only the something, I am not going to explain that right now because I think I don't know what I'm talking about. But there are differences between the test dev version and the production version. But the production version is going to have greater capabilities, such as, like role-based access, where if your role truly permits you to see the individual line items, you get to, right? The unencrypted data. Any other questions? All right.
Thank you, Dean. Let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it. Thank you for spending a couple extra minutes with me.
Former unit of mine.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, just actually left.
Okay. Well, I'm going to say, based on what I hear, let me